Let me remind you, there was a real crime.
It was probably the worst case I've ever seen. It's the nightmare.
I'm Scott Turow. As a best-selling novelist, I've written stories about greed, rage, and resilience.
The bottom line is this.
But sometimes real life is stranger than fiction.
I don't know what the hell you guys want. I wasn't there.
Crimes of horrific nature are like a terrible explosion.
And I just know she was so scared.
I want to be the one to help her.
DNA detective C.C. Moore.
A supernova obliterating lives and remaking them in a way no one could imagine.
I had never been in a situation where there were such high stakes.
Man, this is it.
Oh yeah, guys, let's do this. Let's go catch murderer.
Here he comes.
Coming out. Yep.
We've got him.
Wow.
It was a miracle. These are the stories that keep me up at night. The cases that are truly stranger than fiction.
All right, we're going to talk about the murder of Angie Dodge.
She was only 18. She had just graduated from high school. So when I started working with Parabon, one of the very first cases I ever asked them about, maybe the first case, was the Angie Dodge murder case. She was stabbed. I wanted to find this mystery man who left his DNA behind at the scene of her daughter's murder. There was semen present. Okay. And so the attacker did leave behind biological material.
Parabon Nanolabs is a DNA technology company. We analyze DNA for forensics.
Christopher Conley Tapp served 20 years in prison until he was recently released.
When we began doing genetic genealogy, CC was very eager for us to reach out to Idaho Falls and see if they would allow us to do kinship analysis for them.
Over the past decade, genetic genealogy has exploded onto the scene. I mean, think about this. People are able to spit into a tube and discover their family roots. C.C. Moore began using genetic genealogy to help people who were adopted find their biological parents.
I love you.
I love you too.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Give it up for C.C. Moore.
She received international recognition for her techniques.
And so some very forward-thinking law enforcement officials thought, could we, instead of submitting the DNA of an adoptee looking for their unknown birth parent, submit the DNA of an unknown suspect in a cold case and use the genetic genealogy techniques to determine their identity? And I knew the answer to that question was yes.
In October of 17, I took over the case. So when Parabon reached out to us, if there's something else that's going to give us leads, it's just a no-brainer for us.
Tom, have you been in touch with the department about getting evidence?
Yeah, so there is evidence, degradation.
And we did the initial assessment, and unfortunately, we didn't get very good matches. And CC and we were disappointed, to say the least.
It is 61%.
Yeah, that's...
Okay.
Ooh.
Working with degraded DNA is like trying to put a puzzle together. Say you have 100 pieces in your puzzle. This was missing 39 of those pieces.
Right at the margin for what we would accept.
But CC is very tenacious.
Yeah, I'd really love to be able to help on this case. Carol, Angie's mom, writes to me almost every day. Poor Carol had been trying to find her daughter's killer for 22 years at this point. Unfortunately, in this case, we don't have any strong matches. All of the matches are more distant.
We have a number system that we use.
A 1 means we've got like an immediate family hit. And a 5 means we can't work it.
That's like a D- in a grading system.
Genetic genealogy had never been done on crime scene DNA of this degraded quality. And then I heard from you, and you know, I just had to make this work.
You had to spend all those nights.
I had to figure out a way. I decided to go back and take a deeper look at the genetic genealogy results. And I'm pleasantly surprised to see that it may not be hopeless.
That's good news.
Yeah. So how do we know which line to look at? And I've pushed it up to maybe a 4+. And so even with the degraded DNA, there is hope.
That's exciting.
But it's only because of you, because if you hadn't been so
persistent.
So persistent, I probably wouldn't have spent the time, digging back into this.
I just want to know. And I just know she was so scared.
Give you a hug.
Sorry.
I'm sorry I keep making you cry. That's not what I mean to do. I'm gonna do everything I can, help give you some answers.
Just hope that I live long enough to see the day. So we gotta get busy.
Yeah. So the first thing I did was get a list of matches. People who shared DNA with the unknown suspect. Match number 1. This might be a second cousin once removed or a third cousin-ish with the suspect.
So if I can find their common ancestor, I can work forward in time to find the descendants who were the right age when Angie was murdered. And one of them would have to be her killer.
Another match shares DNA. Their mother, her father. I started building their family trees and building genetic networks to find a common ancestor. This is my genetic network number 1.
And then I built some trees of other people who shared DNA with the suspect, but did not share DNA with the earlier matches. So that would be my genetic network number 2. I'm now trying to find a connection between these 2 networks.
Grandpa, great-grandma.
That link will narrow my search for a descendant who might be Angie's killer.
From genetic network number 1, we have a daughter named Cleo. From genetic network number 2, we have a grandson named Clarence. Guess what happens? They marry. Our suspect has to be a descendant of this marriage through a son, but guess what? They have 5 sons. It has to be someone that was old enough and young enough in 1996. So both their grandsons and great-grandsons could be our suspect. We're down to 6 possible males that could be Angie's killer. 5 of the 6 males lived over 1,000 miles away, but one of them lived in Idaho. So in the middle of winter, I decided to take a trip to Idaho Falls.
Hi.
Hi, nice to meet you, Bill. Hi. Say,
The case detective now. Detective Sergeant.
good to meet you, CC Moore. So I was able to narrow it down to 6 possible suspects for you.
Wow, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
6 is pretty good.
6 is pretty good.
What, can I ask
Yeah,
you something?
please do.
How would you get that familial information for the descendants?
It's a
Just
great
genealogical
question.
information?
I was able to find obituaries for this family. I use newspaper archives quite a bit, marriage announcements and engagement announcements, some really valuable information.
That's great.
Also,
So you are a detective.
Yes,
See,
and
you are a detective. It was not only the first big lead, but really just about the only lead.
Now this 5th son is most interesting to me because they moved to Idaho. Even though it wasn't Idaho Falls, it was a lot closer than everybody else was.
That just puts the onus for us to do our job. We're not just going off of the information we get from you. We're going to have to do the rest of the
traditional police work. We're not going to grab all these 6 guys.
So that means you all have a job to do. You always have a job to do, but you really have a job to do.
Okay, I'm back to eyes on the trooper.
Just lost visual on him. We're trying to catch him.
And you guys are gonna have to work for this one.